I now give the floor to the representative of the expert mechanism on the rights of Indigenous peoples.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to all delegations. I just bring you greetings in my own language, the Cree language. On behalf of my colleagues, the Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, we are a research-based advisory body to the Human Rights Council, the youngest of the 3 UN mechanisms of Indigenous peoples. We too want to welcome this historic opportunity and thank the President and all those responsible for this opportunity to address this important meeting. The role of the Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as one of those that are specifically mentioned in the modalities resolution would like to offer some contributions of work we have done in the past that we think might be helpful in your considerations. For example, with regard to the recommendation to appoint co-chairs for the World Conference itself and also for the roundtables, we would like to offer the independent experts of the mechanism to be considered for that opportunity to contribute. Very importantly, Mr. Chairman and all delegations, we have in the past year consolidated some reports that we think would be very helpful for reference in your consideration of an outcome document. For example, we have compiled all of the conclusions and recommendations of advice that we have given to the Human Rights Council that touches on many of the rights of Indigenous peoples as included in the UN Declaration, the ILO Convention, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and other international norms and standards. This compilation, I think, would be helpful in your deliberation of an outcome document, or a zero draft, I would say. For example, the expert mechanism has analyzed the ALTA outcome document from a rights-based approach and have, from our previous work, supported the ALTA outcome document with basic general human rights of Indigenous peoples and also specific rights of Indigenous peoples to support the ALTA outcome document. We've also done one on business and human rights, on extractive industries. We've consolidated our reports on women. Also, very importantly, as Mexico referred to earlier in their discussion this morning, or intervention this morning, access to justice. We've just recently concluded a 2-year study on access to justice with regard to the rights of Indigenous peoples. A very important element that was not mentioned yet to any great extent, but we feel is extremely important for consideration because, as Mr. Deere mentioned earlier, what got Indigenous peoples to come here, not only to work on the structure but also on rights, those of treaties and treaty rights. We're going to consolidate the work we've done in that area and also offer that for consideration to be included in the zero text. We'd like to offer our assistance or availability with regard to any role that we might be able to serve in the opening ceremonies or the closing remarks as a mechanism on the rights of Indigenous peoples. Finally, we want to ensure that the use of the declaration in this great opportunity of the upcoming World Conference, to use it as a framework for reconciliation. And in that regard, I wanted to underscore 2 of the comments that were made this morning by Nicaragua and Finland to actually remind us that at the most recent International Conference of Parliamentarians, they adopted the Santa Cruz Declaration, which includes that no state should attempt to diminish what has already been agreed to in the UN Declaration. I think if I may restate what Nicaragua said, we do not want to see any backsliding. And I think that's a very important reference to bear in mind as we begin to do the outcome document. The expert mechanism also completed a very detailed study on the right of Indigenous peoples to participate in decision making. And I think some of the comments that we heard this morning also might be helped if we were to look at that final report. The Secretary General's report in that regard was also mentioned this morning, and if you look at the two, it will give us guidance as to going forward on participation. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, we agree with the UN Declaration also being a UN Declaration on treaties. And in that regard, this is a historic opportunity to build on the strengths of both the UN Declaration and treaties where they exist with Indigenous peoples. For example, the fact that you've appointed 4 advisors, 2 to represent states and 2 to represent Indigenous peoples, reflects a treaty partnership, a treaty relationship. And that's what we want to underscore as a framework for going forward. And in having said that, we too support the 4 advisors that have been appointed by the President of the General Assembly to guide us going forward on this tremendous opportunity, as I say, to build on the rights of Indigenous peoples. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much to the representative of the expert mechanism on the rights of Indigenous peoples.